We've all heard this word. It's the ultimate financial boogeyman, the terrifying phantom that haunts massive corporations, A-list celebrities, elite athletes, and ordinary people alike. The word is bankrupt. It's a word that signals complete collapse, end of the line, total financial destruction. When a company goes bankrupt, the doors are locked, the lights are turned off, and thousands of people are out of work. We even use it outside of finance. We call corrupt politicians morally bankrupt, or we say we are emotionally bankrupt after a terrible week. Today on Phrases Explained, we are peeling back the layers of one of the scariest and most definitive words in the English language. We all know what it means, and the word bankrupt feels distinctly modern, doesn't it? It sounds like something invented by a team of Wall Street lawyers in a glass skyscraper. But the origin of bankrupt isn't found in a modern boardroom. In fact, it has nothing to do with modern banks at all. Let's rewind to the bustling, chaotic, and incredibly wealthy marketplaces of Renaissance Italy. Think of Florence, think of Venice. Back then, Italy wasn't a unified country. It was a patchwork of independent city-states, and they all minted their own coins. You had the florin in Florence, you had the ducat in Venice, and countless more. If a merchant traveled from France to buy silk in Florence, their French coins were practically useless, so they needed a local currency exchange. Enter the banchiere. He wasn't sitting behind bulletproof glass in an air-conditioned lobby. Oh no, the world's first financiers set up shop right in the middle of the street amidst the mud and the shouting merchants. The banchiere was a moneylender, an investor, and a currency exchanger all rolled into one. And his official entire office consisted of one very specific piece of furniture, a single, simple, sturdy wooden bench. In Italian, the word for this bench was banca. The wooden banca was everything. It was his desk, his counter, and his physical symbol of creditworthiness. The moneylender would sit behind his banca, often covering it with a green cloth, which, fun fact, is why casino tables and accounting ledgers traditionally use green today. Cool, huh? He would set up his scales to weigh gold, stack his coins, and open his ledger book. If you saw a merchant sitting at his banca, you knew he was open for business, and more importantly, he had the cash to back it up. He was quite literally the bank. That being said, Renaissance commerce was an incredibly risky game. There was no insurance, there was no international police force. It was a huge gamble. And when a banchiere lent money to fund a massive trading expedition to the Middle East or Asia, make no mistake, he was gambling. Ships sank in storms, cargo was stolen by pirates, warlords declared war and seized trade routes. And sometimes the scale of the failure was staggering. For example, in the 1340s, two of the most powerful banking families in Florence, the Bardi and the Peruzzi, lent an absolute fortune to King Edward III of England to fund his wars in France. Well, King Edward didn't win as quickly as he'd hoped, and he simply decided not to pay them back. He defaulted. Those massive, incredibly wealthy banking families literally collapsed, dragging much of the Florentine economy down with them. Whether it was a king defaulting or just a streak of bad investments, the gold would disappear. One morning, the banchiere's customers would arrive at the marketplace to collect their deposits or exchange their coins, and the moneylender would have nothing to give them. He was insolvent. He could not meet his financial obligations. In modern terms, he had failed. Now today, when a bank or a massive company fails, they file Chapter 11 paperwork, or they get taken over by a regulator. A judge reviews it, accountants get involved, and it's a very quiet, sterilized, bureaucratic process. But in Renaissance Italy, they did not do it quiet. In many Italian city-states, they had a very specific, highly public, and intensely literal way of dealing with financial failure. It was designed to be a spectacle. It was designed to humiliate. When a moneylender failed, local magistrates or angry creditors would march into the crowded marketplace. They would approach the moneylender's wooden bench. They would lift him out of his seat, and then taking a heavy hammer or an axe, they broke his bench. Right there, in front of everyone, they shattered it into splinters on the cobblestones. His banca, the ultimate symbol of his trade, his dignity, and his entire business identity, was publicly and violently destroyed. You could no longer do business with this man because he physically no longer had a bench to do business on. And in Italian, this literal act of destruction was described with two words, banca rotta, meaning quite simply, broken bench. The rotta part comes from the Italian verb rompere, meaning to break or shatter. As international trade grew across Europe, so did the concept of financial failure. The Italian merchants were the absolute masters of the European economy at the time, so their terminology became the language of money everywhere. The phrase Banca traveled from the Italian piazzas, moved through France where it was adapted into Bankrupt, and finally crossed the English Channel around the 1530s where it was anglicized into the word we use today, bankrupt. It's a fascinating bit of linguistics because the same rupt root, derived from the Latin ruptus, is the engine behind some of the most chaotic words in the English language. Think about it. When a pipe bursts, it ruptures. When someone cuts you off mid-sentence, they interrupt. When a volcano explodes, it erupts. And when a politician is bought off, their morals are corrupted. All of these words share that primal, violent DNA of bursting, breaking, and destroying structure. Bankrupt belongs to that exact same family. So, historically speaking, saying a company is bankrupt isn't just saying they have no money. You are literally saying their bench is broken. But wait, it gets even crazier. For hundreds of years, bankruptcy wasn't just a financial concept, it was a literal crime. Society viewed people who couldn't pay their debts not as victims of bad luck, but as thieves who had stolen the money and trust of the community. If your bench was broken, the smashing of the wood was just the beginning of your nightmare. Punishments were severe. Across Europe, debtors' prisons were incredibly common. You would be locked in a cell until your family could somehow raise the money to pay off your debts, which is pretty hard to do when you're locked in a cell and can't work. The father of author Charles Dickens was thrown into a debtor's prison in London, and that event was so traumatizing for Dickens that it influenced almost all of his novels. In France, a bankrupt merchant was sometimes forced to wear a bonnet vert, a bright green cap, at all times in public so everyone knew he was a financial failure. Ouch! But leave it to the Italians to come up with the most bizarre punishment. In cities like Florence and Padua, a bankrupt debtor had to undergo a crazy ritual. They were dragged to a public square, stripped down to their underwear or sometimes completely naked, and forced to repeatedly strike their bare backside against a designated stone pillar called the Pietra del Bando, or the Stone of Shame. While aggressively spanking themselves against this rock in front of a jeering, laughing crowd, they had to shout, "I declare bankruptcy," 3 times. I am not making this up. That was the law. I told you. Crazy. Now, thankfully, or maybe not so much depending on your point of view, this brutal view slowly changed over the centuries. As the Industrial Revolution hit and global trade exploded, governments began to realize something important about capitalism. Capitalism required risk, and if you take risks, sometimes you fail. If the penalty for that failure is going to prison, or wearing a humiliating green hat, or publicly smashing your butt against a rock, then no one is going to want to take a risk anymore. No one will start new businesses, and innovation will completely stall. So the first English bankruptcy law was passed under King Henry VIII in 1542, but it was mostly designed to catch people who were fleeing the country to avoid their debts. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries that the modern idea of bankruptcy was born. The focus shifted from violent punishment to orderly legal dissolution. The law became a referee. It created a system where creditors could legally seize whatever assets were left to get something back, but more importantly, it allowed the honest debtor to have their remaining debts wiped clean. It gave them a fresh start. Today, declaring bankruptcy is a highly complex, heavily legalized process designed to resolve debts fairly. It's about reorganization and second chances, not public wood-smashing events or bare-bottomed rock-hating ceremonies. But the language we use holds on to the ghosts of the past. So the next time you hear a news anchor use that scary word bankrupt, or if you read it in a headline, don't just think about the numbers on a spreadsheet, lawyers in suits, or empty retail stores. Think about that dusty, loud, chaotic Italian piazza. Think about the visual of a single hammer blow, the loud sound of splintering wood, and the absolute finality of a broken bench. A word that today simply means financial failure has been carrying the explosive, violent energy of that Renaissance history for over 500 years. Thanks for joining us again today here on Phrases Explained. If you learned something new, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us again. See you next time.